Hi guys, Ryuu here, and in this video we're going to be talking about lighting. I'm going to give you some simple tips on how you can set up lighting for your scene very quickly. Look, modeling is important, I know, but so is everything else in the design process. In our free Hard Surface Jumpstart course, you will not only feel more comfortable with hard surface modeling, but also confident with rendering and excited about your new game-changing portfolio. Link is in your video description. Let's get started. So first of all, we are usually using one Hdri and it's called Abandoned Slipway. The reason for that is basically because the light is flat but also is diffused, which means there are no harsh highlights, there are no harsh reflections, and the light comes from literally everywhere, although there is a slight directionality to it, and I'm going to talk about it right now. So let me show you. I'm going to go to film here and click on transparent to show you where the light is coming from. Now the light is coming from literally behind the camera because the light source is somewhere over there, right? That's the brightest, spot in the sky, right? So that's no bueno, okay? We need to kind of rotate this because you don't want the light to align with a camera lens, because then you will have a flat lighting. So if the camera is pointing this way, right, and the light is more or less pointing this way, you have a very flat shadows. Look at any compact camera images where the flashlight is located above the lens, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The picture is dead. There's no dimension to it because the shadow doesn't really pop. So what we need to do, we need to rotate that light, okay? So to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down here to the right corner until your cursor changes into a crosshair, and we're going to drag it up. Okay, so click and drag it up. We're gonna go here and change it to shader editor and switch here to world. Okay, so now if you do not have this set up, I'll show you how to do it. Let's just delete that. This is the default node setup here, so you're gonna have a world output and background. Now what you want to do is you want to go here to preferences, you're gonna go to add-ons, and you want to install Blender add-on called Node Wrangler. Okay, this one. So click here and save prefs. This will allow us to use shortcuts in this window here. So click on this backdrop, okay, and Control T. This will add these three nodes, and they're quite important. What you want is Abandoned Slipway Hdri, okay? It's gonna be on polyheaven.com. Go here and then go to probably 4K, right? And download it, okay? So you can download it in here, right? Download. Get this. This is fantastic. Once you have it on your PC, go here and install it, which means go to the folder when it's located. Click on it and simply open image, and this will pop. Okay, now when you adjusting light, you actually want to see your HDRI. Okay, so you want to turn off the transparency, and we're going to be using here this rotation on a z-axis, this one. Okay, so click here and literally drag your mouse to the right, and you'll be able to see your environment rotate. Now if your computer is a bit slow, your card is a bit slow, what you can do is switch to EV, right? If you switch to EV, the feedback of the environment is going to be a bit quicker, okay? See what I mean? It's going to be instant. So you can set the light first and then go to cycles. But be aware that reflections, shadows, and everything going to look a bit different or very different in EV than in cycles. So I would rather you were adjusting this in cycles, all right? So let me just click here and rotate it. So what we want this light to come from an angle, okay? From an angle. So if I'm going to go here to my camera, where is it? Here to this camera, and press 0, right? Now you see that the light is coming from the right hand side. What we can do, we can just keep rotating it, okay? We can keep rotating it. We're gonna find a cool angle here, okay? Now it's coming from behind the objects, kind of like here, and it highlights beautifully everything. But this side, you see, this side is a bit dark, right? So we can do two things. First of all, we can remove this top part of the plane which obstructs the light. Remember I told you about obstructing the light? You want to remove that, okay? So click here and literally delete it. This will pump more light in here. In addition to that, we can grab a knife with K, run the knife here, click, right click here and space, and delete that junk, okay? We don't need it. This is all fluff, guys, okay? This is something we're not going to be seeing, so let's delete it. Now you get unobstructed light, but this side here on the left is still a bit dark. So what do? We add a reflector, okay? So we're going to add a plane, move it in here. We're going to rotate it on x-axis, on z-axis, make it larger, and you're going to see what's happening, right? We're going to be reflecting light that's coming from this side back onto the object. This will ensure two things, okay? The light's going to have the same quality, it's going to have the same color, which is really important, all right? So we're going to move it in here, make it bigger, okay? And look at this, okay? I'm gonna turn it off and on. So if you wanna find this plane in your stack here, click on the plane, go here, and press period on the numpad, okay? You're gonna jump to this plane here and turn it on and off, and you'll see the effect of it, right? See? So now what we can do, we can dial down the amount of light that's being reflected by simply changing the, the darkness of it. So watch. If I'm gonna go here and drop it down, my light's gonna be decreasing. See how nifty the trick is, okay? So what you want to introduce a bit of shadows on the left side to create a bit more dimension, a bit more drama, right? So you want this bit on the left to be a bit darker, just a tiny bit darker, yeah? Not too much, but a tiny bit. You can also rotate this plane here, okay, like this, to cast the light from the bottom. You see that? Because the light being reflected flat back on the object. But if I'm gonna do that, the light's gonna bounce here and reflect here in the bottom. You're gonna pump light to all these, lower areas to open it up and make it a bit more bright. So now this is really cool lighting. So look, we're using one light, very simple light, right? Very simple. And we are using reflector. Now in the video with backdrops, I told you to be careful with reflective backdrops, and you can see this in here. You can see the line here going through this image, okay? Watch what happens that when I actually increase the roughness of this plane. So I'm going to increase the clear coat roughness, and this will literally disappear, okay? You see what I mean? Be very careful with reflections, okay? Because they will pop in, and this is going to look nasty in the render, okay? You want to remove that thing. I'm guessing what happens here is that this wall is being reflected down, I think, or maybe the plane, I don't know, but something is being reflected, okay? So you want to remove that. You will still have these reflections here close to the objects, but you remove this nasty edge over there in the background, and that is really good. Now we have one more problem here, okay? And that's the level of light. It's a bit dark, all right? So if you want to make your Hdri brighter, technically, this is not the best way of doing it, but it's a dirty way of doing it. You can increase the power of background. So if I'm gonna go here to 1.6, boom, right? And there you go. And that's almost a final piece. Now the last thing I would do in here, but it's nothing to do with lighting, is to actually rotate this in a way that would show a little bit more of this object, you see, because when it's rotated this way, this part here is really heavy optically. You can't see through it. You can see there is some kind of an edge here, but you can't see really what it is. I would probably do something like this, right? Maybe, maybe. I would need to think about it, okay? But I would just kind of rotate it maybe a little bit. Just open up this gap here. Maybe make it a bit bigger, You could do this as well. Just make it a bit bigger. See what I mean? So always try to manipulate with your scene, okay? Don't be shy, Just make it fit your scene, okay? Make it fit your scene. Anyway, so this is it, guys, and this would be a very simple way of setting a lighting. Okay, so now let's say that you wanted to use lights in Blender, not an HDRI. If I was doing that, I'll probably still go with maybe like 0.2 here on HDRI, okay? Just to retain some of this ambient lighting, and then use lights on top of it. You have two options, okay? One of them is going to be using lights in Blender, and the other one's gonna be using IES lights, meaning lights downloaded from internet. You can go on Google and just type IES lights and download. They're free, they're all over the place. There are baked lights created by manufacturers. You can download them, they're physically correct lighting. You can plug them into lights in Blender. So let's add the light here. A regular area light and put it up here and make it larger, okay? Make it a bit more, strong, so maybe like 300. And if you wanted to go with these lights, these are not accurate lights, okay? I would not advise using them. In Eevee, they're kind of okay, they're kind of cool with like volumetrics, but honestly, in cycles, I wouldn't be using them, okay? What you want to use IES lights. So now the way to enable IES lighting, you simply have to go here to the lighting panel, go down to use nodes, click, and under strength, click on that, and you need to change this to IES. So scroll down here, scroll up, sorry, and click on this texture, okay? So now what you want to do is you want to upload texture just like you upload HDRI here, okay? So click on source external and grab this folder here, go to your downloads where you downloaded the IES pack. Like I said, type IES lights in Google and you'll find a ton of free ones, okay? And they all have different attributes. Now remember, they're physically correct, which means you need to make sure that the distance and the scale of your scene actually fits the light, okay? So you need to upload the IES texture. Remember, this is important, not the PNG, but IES texture, right? Now remember that when you do that, this lighting is going to be actually accurate, which means it will depend on the size of the lighting itself and the scale of your objects, okay? So if it's too strong or too soft, whatever, you need to readjust your scene, right? But this is how it works, guys, okay? So let's say we're gonna go here to, I don't know, define spots or diffuse spots, whatever, right? They're all different kinds of lighting, and this is the best way of using lighting in Blender. Like, look, by itself, this is already really good. This side is a bit dark, but what we could do, we could move this reflector here, right, or rotate it around, okay? Because remember that each of these faces has normals, so you need to face it with the correct normals, which means if I go here to face orientation, where is it? Here. I can check which face is oriented which way. So, these are flipped faces, which means my plane is facing the correct way in here. So I press 0 on the numpad. You see now I'm actually highlighting this area in here, right? So I can lower my light now to bring it closer to my models to make this light stronger. Okay, you don't have to increase the power of your light. You can change the distance of your light from your subject, because the closer you get, the stronger the light's gonna get, but also it's gonna get harsher. Which means if you get closer, you need to make sure that you're gonna actually increase the size of it to make it softer. Because small light source like a sun, because sun is relatively small in the sky, is gonna cast harsh shadows, right? So if I do that, see what happens to my shadows? They're much more defined. If I do this one, they're much more diffused, because the light source is larger. It's kind of like the situation with our Hdri, which is diffused, which means the whole sky here acts as a softbox, because the sun shines through the clouds disperse the light, and the light shines on your object. This is why we use this Hdri, because it's diffused and soft. Right, so if you want to have a more defined lighting, what you need to do is simply change the size of the lighting, okay? Change the size of the lighting. And you could also go ahead and play with colors. Like, if you're going to make it really small, this is going to be far more dramatic, okay? Which is also cool. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. So let's now talk about problems. First problem I'm seeing in here is that the foreground here is way too bright, okay? So what we could do is possibly move this light a little bit backwards. So maybe we could do something like this. The shadow's going to go a bit forward, and the background's going to remain a bit, a bit calmer. The problem with this one is going to be that you're going to have a bit more shadows on the form, but it's going to look also quite interesting. This part is a bit bright, right? But what we could do, we could tone it down in Photoshop. You can do this in Photoshop, okay? So, not everything has to be done in Blender, okay? If it's too harsh for you, you can move this light away, or maybe make it a little bit larger to diffuse this light, So you have a lot of control over your lighting, okay? So if I brought it to Photoshop and this foreground here was too, too bright, what I would do, I would grab this gradient tool here, press D to reset my colors here, and I'm gonna paint with black here holding Shift, and then switch it to soft light to darken down the foreground. Now, if you render the object separately from the background, you will be able to use a cutout of these objects to remove this gradient from the object, right? And then you can, kind of fine tune this, how far you want it to go. You can squash it to make it a little bit more, kind of more aggressive. And there you go. You got this foreground here darkened, and the focus is being brought back into the objects in the background. You see what I mean? So this is really important. So not everything has to be done in Blender. In fact, you need to understand what you can get away with Blender, right? And what you can fix in Photoshop, right? When I was shooting photography, I wasn't thinking to get shot perfect in my camera. I was thinking what I can remove in Photoshop, what I can get away with, right? So that is essential. Same with brightness, if this is too dark for me, right? I can very easily go to camera raw here, and I can pump it up, okay? So I can go here and I can pump it up. You see what I mean? I can lift my shadows, right? I can do all kinds of stuff. So this is not a problem, okay? But you need to have a decent image to start with. So to have decent image to start with, you need to have a fairly decent amount of lighting. And also, when you're saving your image, make sure you're going to be saving it as a TIFF and 16-bit. Now you could save it as EXR. I don't really use EXRs because they're a bit annoying to handle in Photoshop. I'm saving it with TIFFs and they're fine. Now, if you're saving something without the background, you make sure that you're going to choose RGBA. A stands for alpha. If you choose this one, you will not be, it's going to be, white background, okay? You need this if you want to render something like this, okay? So if you render without a background, make sure that you're going to use this. The same goes to the trick with shadows. If you're going to go here to this option, right, and enable shadow catcher, right, you also have to turn off the turn transparency here. If you're going to render this, all right, without RGBA, this background will not be transparent, so make sure to turn it on, right? So I usually have this on all the time because, I don't want to forget about it, and that's how I work. So again, guys, using lights is fine. You can use one light, you can use multiple lights, it's not a problem. What I would recommend is always watching for highlights, always watching for visual anchors, for too much of a contrast, reflections. This is what you need to be careful about, okay? Another trick I can give you for lighting is that when something is too bright or too dark, what you can do, you can manipulate with the texture. Let's say you have a really nice light setup, okay, but the object is still too bright. What you can do is go here and literally darken it down, okay? See what I mean? Darken down, because remember, something that's darker will reflect less light. Something that's brighter is going to reflect more light, okay? So you can manipulate with your texture, not with the light, but with your texture. The same goes to background, guys, because if I make this background darker, right, less light will be reflected into the scene, which means the object is going to get darker. Because look, light falls down here, right, reflects from the background back onto the object. If I'm going to make this background brighter, the inner side here is going to become brighter. In addition, this inner side is going to cast light back onto an object, so the light is going to keep bouncing. So everything is important, okay? The brightness, the darkness of the background of the light, the type of the light, size of the light, shape of the light, position of the light, and then also colors. Because look, if I'm going to get this background, make it blue, right, my object's going to be blue because light carries color. So it's gonna be cast down here. So there's a white light being cast down. The background is blue. It's gonna take this color with it and travel onto the object, okay? So now the last thing is the same goes with color of light, okay? So if you change the color of light, well, your scene is gonna change, right? So try not to mix too many color of lights. So if you wanna add colorful lights, then, stick to one color or stick to color palette, because colors have complementary colors. You need to research that. It's really important. So it's not random, okay? It's not, you need to stay within certain rules and understand the rules to create a really nice lighting, okay? Alright guys, well that's it for the lighting video. I think this is enough for you to get your head around lighting in Blender and create some really compelling scenes. You do not need much. Now what I would recommend highly is that you get yourself a really good Hdri pack from Gumroad. Is on Essential store. There are 2 packs over there and 50 Hdris each, and they are studio Hdris that are really good quality. So if you want to use studio lights, that's what you should get, okay? They're not expensive, to just go ahead and get them, and you're gonna be having lights for literally every occasion, okay? I'm using mostly in my work Abandoned Slipaway. I sometimes use the Hdris from Alex pack, okay, the one I told you about, and very, very rarely I'm using lights in Blender. Mostly when I'm working in Eevee. I almost never use artificial lighting in Blender when I'm working in cycles, unless I want to create some kind of separation light, okay? Now separation light is something interesting. I can briefly tell you what it is. It's a light that you put behind an object, okay, to separate it from the background. So for instance, if you have a pinpoint light here, right, and you put it behind the object here, right, so we're gonna put it somewhere here, right, and we're gonna make it stronger, let's say 400, okay, and there's a lighting over there, right? So let me just go here and find it, and this is our light, right, see behind, and I can change color of it, right? So let's say we're gonna make it blue, see? So this light is going to be casting a color or whatever on your scene, or just simply separating an object from the background. So if this light wasn't here, if I'm going to remove this lighting from the scene, right, you'll see this light in the back, it's gonna separate the object from the background. So let's say you have a black object in your scene and you have a black background. You need to separate them from one another, otherwise it's just gonna meld together. Okay, you need to show the outline of the object that you are shooting, otherwise it will not work. So if I, for example, had this, object here really dark and my background was, really dark, right? So let's just drop it down, and not reflective, okay? Not reflective, so really rough, okay? These two objects, the object and the background is gonna really melt together, right? They're gonna just kind of, come as one. So what we can do is, create some separation line, right? Let's reduce this to 0 and move this somewhere here, make it a bit bigger. So let me just increase the radius of it, right? Something like that, and increase the power and put it somewhere in the back. And if I turn it on and off, you see like creates this kind of like a rim around. You see that rim? Okay, see what I mean? It just separates it, and it creates like an outline around it to separate it from this background. So this is an interesting technique that you can use, and you can use it in addition with the main light, of course, and it's really commonly used in photography, so go ahead and use it. This one is a bit too strong, but I'm trying to drive a point here, right? So I wouldn't make it so strong. You need to be careful with it not to spill too much here. So there you go, guys. That's all about lighting. I think you should be fine now, and you should be able to create some really interesting lights in your scene. That's how you do it in Blender. Don't overthink it, keep it simple. Remember, one Hdri and a reflector, or just 1 or 2 light max, and you're fine. You don't have to go crazy. And play with IES lights, try to find good lights online, make a folder for yourself, and start using them in your project. They are fantastic for arc-based realistic projects because they actually are realistic lights. They behave like real lights, they have a fall off like real lights, reflections, intensity, color, whatever. Everything is very realistic. So if you want to create some realistic scene, let's say indoors, then you will need to use IES lights, okay? Alright guys, well thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.